Good morning, people. Down here on the river making a few pancakes, getting ready to go to work today. I thought I would just put a little footnote on the conversation we've been having about black pill, I, it, and I, thou to kind of firm things up. I hope that we can understand a lot of this thinking comes from perhaps the work of Ken Wilber, that as human beings mature and as they evolve, one of the essential characteristics that is associated with maturity is the expansion of the concept of self. Infants have a very, very limited and myopic view of self. Most people in the society that we live in our culture that we call Western civilization, has still a very, very small, limited conception of self. We elevate the individual almost as a monad without context of the very real objective connections that the individual has with larger culture, society, the environment, the rest. Again, that's not a very evolved or intelligent view. It does sell, however, a great deal of consumer product because, of course, if you have no sense of connection to other because you are fixated on a juvenile understanding of the self, stimulus is the only way you can satiate your basic human needs, such as they are, even as retarded as they are. Now, it's important to understand if you are moving into the concept of I, thou versus I, it, then I am not in any way necessarily suggesting that we need to move or evolve towards a certain kind of collectivism. The individual in an evolved, more expansive conception of self remains as important as it would have been even in that mind of an infant. It's just that there is more. Again, the individual is just as important as one evolves and moves forward. It's just that there is more. There's additional context. Just as the infant has a very important sense of self, learning that other people actually exist does not diminish that sense of self. Just as an individual who lives in a modern Western consumer economy, where interactions with other people are largely transactional, where the concerns of other people are largely secondary to one's own visceral and base needs being met, crudely, the individual as they evolve remains as important as they were before. It's just that the awareness of the importance of the larger system that supports the individual becomes equally as important, objectively as important, consciously as important, and that self-interest that was previously only contained in the individual is now extended to that larger biome. Now, this is not a new conception. In fact, it's a very ancient conception. In fact, for most of human history, it's been the dominant conception. You may have heard other people say things like, love thy neighbor as thyself. It's just that the average individual who hears that phrase hears it from an I-it point of view. If you were to hear the same thing from an I-thou point of view, if you were to love your neighbor as yourself, the as means as objectively oneself, being a co-participant in the larger system that supports both of you. And if you were to love your neighbor as yourself, you would extend as much concern, goodwill, and support to those around you as you do yourself because your conception of self is large enough that it encompasses both. But this is not how we go about it. I mean, we cut down virgin forest to make toilet paper out of it and then are surprised that there's no trees left. We, in our intimate relationships with other people, treat other people as objects and then be surprised that our relationships do not have the quality of durability. We're surprised at these things. In fact, really what we do is we operate with an astonishing level of what could be only called privilege. Privilege, probably best defined as the ability to act without consequences. We've had a good run of that, but consequences are here now. And the privilege of isolating ourselves from the consequences of our choices and actions. Well, it's going to be much more difficult going forward by the day to isolate ourselves from the consequences of our choices and actions. So as profound as it can be in implication, there's a very practical aspect to I-thou relating with the world, and that it is inherently contrary to I-it and not suicidal, which I-it inevitably will be. If a organism pays no attention to the larger system that makes the organism's very existence possible, the consequences of that, at least in the long run, are that the organism that pays no attention becomes extinct. This will be a characteristic of any kind of interaction. Any interaction that is continually hollowed out and exploited rather than supported will not persist. This can be very, very, very simple. It can be a matter of thermodynamics, if you'd like. But rather, there's a visceral choice for the individual who has expanded self and the concerns of self to embrace the larger system that supports the self, as would only be fitting for a mature and evolved mind. That one extends care, concern, stewardship, support to the system, because the system supports the individual. The individual is important, but it is known that the individual cannot exist without the system as well. It's important we don't get mired in a bunch of woo or moralism or shoulds or things of that nature here. This is a matter of life and death. And any of us who are going to hope to persist into the future of scarcity with some kind of quality of life and some kind of duration and persistence in our relationships of any scope or scale need to wrap our head around this fact straight away. Of all the issues that face mankind, many of them are technical. This one may be psychological, but without understanding the need to move to I-thou from I-it, none of the other technical solutions that may exist can even be employed in a constructive manner. And in fact, our fate is sealed. So, chew on that, people. You have a good day.